Do we truly know the Ten Commandments? In a world saturated with fleeting trends and shifting moral landscapes, the ancient bedrock of ethical living often recedes into the shadows of collective memory. Their profound significance, once a guiding star for civilizations, now frequently overlooked, reduced to mere historical footnotes rather than living principles. Yet, what happens when these forgotten laws resurface, not as abstract concepts, but as a mirror reflecting the very soul of a community and the hidden crevices of a man's conscience? In the heart of a close-knit, unnamed community, Elias stood as a pillar of respectability. His silver hair, kind eyes, and measured words commanded deference. He was a community leader, revered for his wisdom and his seemingly unwavering faith, often seen guiding local initiatives and offering counsel. But beneath the polished facade, a deep chasm of moral compromise festered. Years ago, a betrayal, a moment of weakness disguised as pragmatism, had driven a wedge between him and the fundamental principles he publicly espoused. He lived a life of quiet hypocrisy, constantly navigating the tightrope between maintaining his impeccable public image and the gnawing guilt of his past transgressions. He believed he had buried his secret deep enough that the passage of time had eroded its sharp edges. His estranged granddaughter, Sarah, embodied a different kind of seeker. Young, with a mind sharp as a diamond, and an idealism that burned bright, she was a scholar dedicated to unearthing the historical and ethical impact of the very commandments Elias struggled to uphold. Her personal journey was marked by profound loss and unanswered questions, a tragedy that had left her searching for meaning in the often unforgiving tapestry of faith and justice. The grandfather she barely knew, the man whose reputation preceded him, was a distant, almost mythical figure in her life. Yet, a deep-seated need to understand her family's past, and perhaps to bridge the chasm of estrangement, drew her back to the community, and, inevitably, to Elias. The initial tremor of conflict struck when Elias was unexpectedly asked to deliver the upcoming Sunday sermon, its theme, the Ten Commandments. The request landed like a lead weight in his stomach, forcing him to confront the very hypocrisy he meticulously concealed. How could he preach on principles he had so flagrantly violated? As fate would have it, Sarah, drawn by the news of her grandfather's prominent role, attended the sermon, hoping for some glimmer of connection, some answer to her own existential queries. Instead, she left with more questions, a vague disquiet settling in her heart. The disquiet soon transformed into a chilling certainty. While sifting through old family documents, a forgotten box of letters and journals, Sarah stumbled upon an unsettling truth. The injustice that had shattered her family years ago, the tragedy that had shaped her own life, bore Elias's subtle, yet undeniable, imprint. He had been indirectly involved, his actions, or inactions, a direct violation of a sacred commandment. The revelation was a seismic shock, creating an immediate, irreparable rift between them. The respected community leader was suddenly a betrayer in her eyes. Elias, sensing Sarah's growing suspicion, tried to avoid her, hoping the truth would remain buried. But Sarah, fueled by a fierce desire for clarity and accountability, persisted. She believed the commandments held the key, not just to understanding her family's past, but to unlocking a deeper truth about justice itself. The tension between them crackled, unspoken accusations hanging heavy in the air. As the pressure mounted, an anonymous, chilling note arrived at Elias's home, slipped under his door. Its message was cryptic, but unmistakable. The past always finds its way back. Some commandments cannot be broken without consequence. The shadow of his secret had found its way out of the darkness. Someone else knew. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. The anonymous threat, a stark reminder of his carefully hidden transgressions, amplified Elias's internal turmoil. He had hoped to manage Sarah, to deflect her relentless inquiries with platitudes and vague assurances. But the note changed everything. It was no longer just about Sarah. It was about public exposure, about the meticulous edifice of his reputation crumbling. He found himself pacing his study, the familiar comfort of his leather-bound books offering no solace. Sarah, however, was not easily deterred. Armed with irrefutable evidence, old financial records, shadowed testimonies, and the damning entries in her deceased parents' diary, she confronted Elias directly. The encounter took place in his quiet study, the air thick with unspoken history. Her voice, usually soft, now carried an unyielding edge. She laid the documents on his polished mahogany desk, each paper a silent accusation. Elias initially attempted his usual denials, his eyes darting between the papers and Sarah's resolute gaze. He tried to dismiss them as misunderstandings, as the misinterpretations of a grieving child. But the weight of the truth, meticulously pieced together by Sarah, pressed down on him, slowly cracking the carefully constructed facade he had maintained for decades. A flicker of something akin to fear, then shame, crossed his face. The memory, long suppressed, surged forward with brutal clarity. It was a time of financial desperation for the community, a period when a crucial land deal could have saved many livelihoods. Elias, then a rising figure, had been entrusted with the negotiations. A rival developer, ruthless and unethical, offered him a substantial bribe to steer the deal away from its rightful beneficiaries, including Sarah's family. The promise of personal gain, coupled with the pressure to maintain his own burgeoning status, had clouded his judgment. He had rationalized it, told himself it was for the greater good, that others would find their way. But the decision had been a direct violation of the commandment against coveting, leading to the financial ruin and subsequent emotional devastation of Sarah's parents. He saw again the look on her father's face, the quiet despair in her mother's eyes. He had effectively stolen their future, all for his own perceived benefit. The flashback was vivid, the shame a bitter taste in his mouth. Sarah watched him, her heart a tumultuous mix of anger, hurt, and a strange nascent pity. She had sought justice, but seeing the raw, unvarnished truth of his transgression, the visible crumbling of his dignity, was more painful than she had anticipated. Yet she would not back down. "This isn't just about money, grandfather," she stated, her voice trembling slightly. "This is about trust, about the principles you preach. You broke a commandment, not just a rule, and the cost was immense. How can you speak of redemption if you can't even acknowledge the wound you inflicted?" Her words, delivered with a quiet intensity, were a powerful monologue on the profound cost of forgotten principles. She spoke of redemption not as a blanket forgiveness, but as a painstaking process of acknowledgement, repentance, and restitution. Meanwhile, the external pressure on Elias mounted. Another anonymous message, this time a chilling photograph, arrived. It was an old picture of him, shaking hands with the very developer who had bribed him, taken discreetly years ago. The caption, scrawled on the back, read, "TikTok, Elias, the truth finds its hour." This escalation added a desperate urgency to his internal struggle, threatening to expose his past to the entire community. He knew he was running out of time. In the periphery, an older, wise member of the community, an elder named Miriam, observed the strained interactions between Elias and Sarah. Miriam, a woman whose quiet strength and unwavering moral compass were legendary, offered subtle, almost imperceptible guidance. She never directly interfered, but her occasional insightful questions to Elias about the true meaning of leadership, or to Sarah about the nature of forgiveness, subtly nudged them towards truth and reconciliation. She often spoke of the commandments not as rigid laws, but as pathways to genuine human connection and societal harmony. One evening, driven by the escalating threats, Elias began to investigate the source. He recognized a unique watermark on the paper, a detail only a few would know. A sickening realization dawned on him. The anonymous threats were coming from Samuel, a man whose family had been among the hardest hit by Elias's past betrayal, a man who had since moved away, nursing a deep-seated grievance. Samuel was not seeking justice in the traditional sense. He was seeking vengeance, a public reckoning for the wrong he had endured. Elias's world, already fracturing, now faced an inevitable, painful collision. The day of the community sermon dawned, heavy with unspoken tension. Elias, his face etched with sleepless nights, stood before the mirror, adjusting his tie. Today, he was scheduled to deliver the keynote address on the Ten Commandments, a cruel irony given the storm brewing within him. The community hall was packed, a sea of expectant faces. Sarah sat in the third row, her gaze unwavering, a silent challenge. Elias felt Samuel's eyes on him too, a burning intensity from the back of the hall. The choice was stark. Continue the charade or shatter the carefully constructed illusion of his life. As he walked to the podium, the weight of his hypocrisy pressed down, a tangible burden. He looked at Sarah, then at Miriam, whose gentle nod seemed to offer not judgment, but understanding. He saw Samuel, his posture rigid, awaiting the inevitable confrontation. The microphone hummed, amplifying the silence. Elias cleared his throat, his voice raspy. "My dear friends," he began, his usual confident tone replaced by a tremor. "Today I was meant to speak to you about the Ten Commandments, those ancient pillars of our faith." He paused, taking a deep, shuddering breath. "But before I can speak of them, I must first speak of myself and of a profound failure." A ripple of unease spread through the congregation. Sarah leaned forward, her heart pounding. Elias's gaze met hers, then swept across the faces before him. "Many years ago," he continued, his voice gaining a fragile strength, "I violated one of these sacred commandments, the one that warns against coveting, against bearing false witness, against stealing what is not rightfully yours." His eyes found Samuel's. "I allowed greed and ambition to corrupt my judgment. I made a decision that caused immense suffering, particularly to the family of Samuel, and by extension, to my own granddaughter, Sarah." The words, raw and unvarnished, hung in the air. A public confession tearing through the fabric of his meticulously crafted reputation. He spoke of the land deal, of the bribe, of the destruction it wrought, specifically acknowledging the pain he had inflicted on Sarah's parents. A collective gasp swept through the hall. Sarah felt a profound shock, a mix of vindication and sorrow. Her grandfather, the respected leader, was confessing. He was not the villain she had sometimes imagined, but a deeply flawed man, finally confronting his demons. Tears welled in her eyes, not of anger, but of a complex, overwhelming grief for the years lost, and a nascent hope for what might be. Samuel, who had risen from his seat, ready to confront Elias publicly, froze. The carefully rehearsed accusations died on his lips. Elias's confession, so complete and agonizingly public, disarmed him in a way vengeance never could. His need for retribution, honed over decades, suddenly felt hollow in the face of such raw honesty. He slowly sank back into his seat, his fists unclenched, his face a mask of bewildered pain. The aftermath was a whirlwind of murmurs, shock, and eventual quiet reflection. Elias, having laid bare his soul, felt a strange, terrifying lightness. He had lost his carefully guarded image, but perhaps in doing so, he had found something far more valuable. Sarah rushed to him, not with anger but with a tentative embrace. "Grandfather," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion, "it's going to be okay." This was the beginning of their long, arduous journey toward reconciliation, an understanding that true forgiveness was not immediate, but earned through acknowledgement and a genuine commitment to amend. In the weeks and months that followed, Elias stepped down from his leadership roles, dedicating himself to making amends. He worked tirelessly to support those he had wronged, finding practical ways to restore what he had taken, even if it was only a fraction. Sarah, no longer driven by anger, joined him in his efforts, their shared purpose slowly weaving the frayed threads of their relationship back together. She found peace, not in vengeance, but in the slow, painstaking process of healing and rebuilding. Their journey became a testament to the enduring power of the Ten Commandments, not merely as rules to be followed, but as a blueprint for a just and compassionate life, a guide for navigating the complexities of human fallibility. Elias, once a preacher of principles he did not fully embody, now lived them, demonstrating that redemption was always possible, even for the most grievous of sins. Their story posed a silent question to all who heard it. How do we, in our own lives, truly live by these ancient principles? And what does it truly mean to seek and offer redemption? The path was long, but for Elias and Sarah, it had finally begun.